Hey everybody, my name is Brady Witten and I welcome you to this week's Mid-City Sermon Cast. So this coming Sunday is the first Sunday of Advent. And Advent is the 4-week period of sort of spiritual preparation as we ready ourselves to celebrate the birth of Christ. But the first Sunday of Advent is also the very beginning of the Christian calendar. So this is the week that it kind of flips over and we start the calendar all over again. And so really, it's our Happy New Year. And so I just wanted to say, Happy New Year. So in the season of Advent, we start in what kind of seems to be a peculiar place with a reminder about the second coming of Christ. And we're going to dive into that today. So the season of Advent starts in what seems to be kind of a peculiar place, and that's with a reminder of the second coming of Christ. And that the second coming is the promise that one day Jesus will return and he will establish God's eternal kingdom, the kingdom of love and light, here on earth. And it used to really strike me as kind of an odd place to start, right? But the more I've thought about it, the more it makes sense. See, we start decorating our house for Christmas the day after Thanksgiving. Actually, this year we've even started earlier. So our tree is up. It's not fully decorated yet, but we've got lights out. There's Christmas music playing. Like if you go to a store, you'll start to hear Christmas music and see Christmas stuff around. But the reading that we're given at the beginning of Advent is this. So this comes from Luke 21. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on earth distress among nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to take place, stand up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Then he told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Be on guard so that your hearts are not weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of this life, and that day does not catch you unexpectedly like a trap. For it will come upon all who live on the face of the whole earth. Be alert at all times, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things that will take place and stand before the Son of Man. So here's the question I always asked in this first week of Advent. So I thought Christmas was about the birth of Jesus, right? What are we doing talking about Jesus's return? But the more I've spent time with the Jesus story and the Christmas story, the more this makes sense to me. So before you begin a journey, what do you typically want to know? Like if you're going to get ready, you're taking a trip. My family, we go to Disney World, every few years or so. And like before we take that trip, what's something you want to know? I want to know where we're going. What's the kind of destination, right? And I really think that that's the point of this first Sunday of Advent. We start our journey towards Christmas. We start this journey towards, remembering the birth of Jesus with a reminder of our final destination. And again, that is that one day Jesus will return and will establish God's eternal kingdom on earth once and for all. So to really understand what's going on here, one of the things we need to know is that for the early Christians, this teaching of the second coming was good news. And I'm not sure that we modern day Christians understand that clearly, right? And one of the reasons we don't is because some of this imagery is a little frightening, isn't it? So just from this reading today, there will be distress among the nations. People will faint from fear and foreboding. The powers of the heavens will be shaken, right? So when we hear those kind of things, it sounds a little scary, right? But if you read really carefully in this passage, you'll see that there are also indications of hope and good news. Verse 28 says this, "Stand up, raise your heads, your redemption is drawing near." And verse 31 says this, "When you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near." So Jesus and Paul both compare what is coming, this age to come, with a woman in childbirth. And, my wife and I have 3 kids, and I watched her heroically carry and give birth to all 3, right? But if you think about it, if maybe you've been through that yourself or you've seen somebody else go through it, having a baby is a scary thing. And I remember, Tasha just kind of like, especially with the first one being like, oh no, what's going on? Like this is scary stuff, right? It's anxiety producing. Parents may not know this, but their whole world is about to be turned upside down. Like I think, I kind of chuckle sometimes when I see people who are just getting ready to have a baby and I think, oh, they don't know. I do want to say this. I think parenting is one of the most beautiful, but one of the most difficult things that I've ever done in my life, right? But it turns your entire world upside down. Childbirth is messy, it's chaotic, it's painful, but in the end, there's a cry that changes everything, a new life full of possibilities. And that's kind of what this Advent season is like, or the second coming conversation is like. There's a lot of scary and anxiety things about a whole new world coming and an old world being left behind. But ultimately, it's about the good news that something great is coming, something beautiful is coming. Again, this kingdom of love and light. So I just want to make it clear, the teaching on the second coming is not supposed to make us be afraid. It's meant to give us hope. And one of the ways I think that I can apply that in my day-to-day life is this. Life is hard, right? And this world is broken. And there are painful things that happen to us and that we see happen to other people. And I always, want to just take a moment and say, some of you may be going through some of those really hard and broken things right now. But one thing I want us to know, and one thing I think this idea of the second coming teaches us is, it's not forever. The day is coming when everything is going to be made right and when God will fulfill God's promises. And I hope you believe that. I think I often use the phrase, like, sometimes we have to see it through the eyes of faith. Sometimes my physical eyes, all they see is the broken stuff. But through the eyes of faith, we have that hope and we can see this promise of God coming. So one question people will naturally ask when we talk about this kind of stuff is this: all right, when's it going to happen, right? We've been at this as Christians for like 2,000 years. Like, where's this promise, right? And the answer is, we don't know. And I know I hate to say that, but in Mark 13:32, it says this: "No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father." So there's this idea that while we're waiting for the culmination of all things and the fulfillment of God's kingdom, we don't know when it's coming. I've kind of settled my heart in the idea that, the fact that I know it's coming is good, right? And of course, I'm like everybody else. All right, hurry it up, right? But Jesus says something really interesting in this passage from Luke. Verse 32, he says this: "Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place." Now, I think one thing we have to stop and ask is Jesus wrong? Because clearly it's been 2,000 years, that generation has passed away. So what's Jesus getting at? What's he telling us? And I think this, so in like kind of classical thinking about the coming kingdom, we often say this: the kingdom of God is both a coming reality and a present reality. So I'm going to say that again because it seems like a strange idea, right? The kingdom of God is both a coming reality, so we look forward to it coming in its fullness one day, but it's also a present reality. And the Bible gives us all kinds of word pictures of, well, what does that mean? So think about if you're a gardener, if you've ever planted a seed in your garden. So you plant the seed, and the seed is planted, right? And it's growing and it's doing its thing. But what you're waiting for is you're waiting for the fulfillment of that seed planted to come. Another one Jesus gives us is if you're you ever make bread, so it's like making bread. So you work the yeast into the dough, right? And the yeast is in there, it's doing its thing, but you're waiting for the bread to rise, and you're waiting for that final moment to come where you can bake it and enjoy it. And the other one that we've already talked about is an expectant mother, right? So while that child is growing in the mother's womb, that child is there, and the hope of that new life is there. But you're waiting for it to come in its fullness, right? And the kingdom of God, Jesus tells us, is like that. So it's a coming reality, but it's also a present day reality. And so while we await the total and final fulfillment of the kingdom, we can also begin to live in and experience elements of that kingdom here and now. There are elements of the kingdom of God that we don't have to wait for. There's a story I read a while back about two monks who had set out on a pilgrimage to a distant holy site. And the younger monk was eager to get there. He was always rushing ahead, asking how much farther they had to go, while the elder monk walked slowly, taking in the scenery, greeting villagers, helping people along the way where he can. One evening while they were kind of resting together around a fire, the younger monk asked the older one, "Why aren't you in a hurry? Don't you want to get there?" And the elder monk replied this, "The destination is important, yes, but God is also found along the way in the people we meet, the lessons we learn, and the way we live as we travel." And so there's this that's this kind of idea of this both and. So what do we do in the meantime? I think that's the question. So Jesus invites us to live with purpose, with alertness, with hope, trusting in his promises even when the world seems dark and chaotic. And Advent is really about cultivating this alertness and this awareness. So during Advent, we focused on all kinds of practices that help us to focus on Jesus and his kingdom, and to focus on them, yes, as a coming reality, but also as a present day reality. So throughout this season, one of the things we're going to do as a church is we're going to light an Advent wreath. I would encourage you, if you've got one at home, to set up an Advent wreath, and it can help you to kind of be attentive as you journey through this time. Maybe you can read an Advent devotional, and we have some available through the church. If you want one, write to info@firstmethodist.org. We'd love to send you one. Maybe you could journal during Advent and journal a gratitude list, or journal your big questions, or just some way of cultivating sort of your inner awareness and your inner spiritual conversation. I think one of the biggest things you could do is you can volunteer to serve and to help people, and to really be the presence of Christ, again, as we all await the coming of Christ's kingdom. So Advent reminds us that we are both journeying towards Christ's return, and we can experience his presence now. So my prayer for you is that you will find God not only in the destination, which is important and it matters, but also in every step of the journey. So I mentioned lighting an Advent wreath, and we're going to do that each week as we journey through Advent together. And so I have a brief reading, and then we'll light our first candle, the candle of hope. So as winter days dim and bow to early darkness, you, God of light, set watch in the night sky and beckon the wise to follow. When hope hangs low in the human heart, you, loving Creator, kindle compassion, breathing life into the early embers of change and empathy. We light a candle for hope, sending prayers high into the inky heavens and dreams deep into the human soul. As Advent dawns, God of all hope, shine your light on the story of the saints who journeyed before us. May the seeds they planted in the world, peace, joy, and love take hold in our hearts and stretch towards the light. We light a candle for hope. May it light the way. See you next time, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Mid-City Church Sermoncast. If you'd like to find a home sheet, a resource that accompanies the sermoncast that has more questions to explore, the scriptures we use today, and more information, you can visit our website, midcity.church/sermoncast. If you'd like to support Mid-City Church by giving, please text the word GIVE to 225-307-0662. Thank you for your generosity, and we look forward to seeing you next week.